The most dangerous enemy isn't the one shouting at you from across the battlefield. It's the one sitting quietly at your dinner table, smiling, nodding, pretending to care. That's the kind of darkness people never talk about. The kind that wears the face of your friend, your mother, your brother. That's the one you never see coming. Why? Because you're looking for demons in the wrong places. You're expecting fire, not a warm hug. You're expecting rage, not a concerned voice. But the real demons, the ones that derail your purpose, dilute your energy, distract your soul, they move through the people you trust most. Familiarity blinds you. You've known them for years. You grew up together. They were there during your darkest times, so your mind keeps telling you they're good people. But here's the truth. Time doesn't equal alignment. History doesn't guarantee loyalty. Just because someone was with you yesterday doesn't mean they're meant for your tomorrow. And just because someone is family by blood doesn't mean they're family by spirit. There are people who live in your house, eat your food, and speak your language, but their energy belongs to something else entirely. You know it, you feel it, but you don't trust yourself because love has made you blind. Demons don't walk into your life with hate. They come disguised as comfort. They come as the ones who mean well, the ones who want you to be realistic. When you start talking about your calling, your dreams, your inner peace, notice who suddenly changes. Notice who rolls their eyes, who laughs under their breath, who says, "Don't get too carried away." These are not casual remarks. These are tiny stabs to your spirit, because the demon doesn't always want to destroy you. Sometimes it just wants to delay you. It wants to slow you down. It wants to keep you from seeing who you really are. It hides in sarcasm. It hides in passive-aggressive jokes. It hides in concern that feels more like control. Are you sure you should be doing that? You're acting different lately. Why are you isolating yourself? But deep down, you know you're not isolating. You're healing. You're awakening. You're detaching from low vibrations. And they feel it. They feel you pulling away from the matrix they're still stuck in, and they can't handle it. Because your rise forces them to confront their own stagnation. And most people would rather drag you back into the mud than deal with the discomfort of their own inner emptiness. These demons don't come with violence. They come with tradition. They come with shared memories. They come with cultural loyalty, emotional debt, and spiritual contracts you never consciously agreed to. They say, "You owe me," and your heart wants to believe them, but your soul knows better. Your soul doesn't negotiate with guilt. It moves with truth. And the truth is anyone, no matter how close, who makes you feel small when you try to grow, who shames you when you try to stand tall, who discourages you when you step into your power, is not walking in love. They're operating from fear, envy, or possession. And those are the very frequencies that demons ride. Look at their energy. Don't get lost in the words. Words are easy. Anyone can say the right things. I love you. I'm proud of you. I support you. But what does their energy say when you're not watching? Do you feel safe around them? Do you feel seen? Do you feel lighter? Or do you feel judged, misunderstood, emotionally drained? That is the question. That is the cloak coming off. The ones who say all the right things, but leave you feeling worse after every conversation. That's where the disguise cracks. That's where the real battle begins, not with them, but within you. Can you see past the mask? Can you trust your gut when your heart wants to stay blind? That's the first test. That's how the demon stays hidden, through your own refusal to see what your spirit already knows. Words are the easiest mask a person can wear. Anyone can say, "I care about you." Anyone can say, "I want the best for you." But energy doesn't lie. Energy is the silent language of the soul. You don't hear it with your ears, you feel it with your spirit. When someone carries darkness within them, you feel it even when they smile. When someone speaks sweet words but holds resentment, their energy betrays them. That's why so many people stay confused. They trust what they hear instead of what they feel. They're listening to conversations, but ignoring how those conversations make them feel afterwards. You walk away feeling tired, anxious, insecure, drained, and you call it love. That's not love. That's spiritual warfare. Your spirit always knows. You might ignore it, silence it, reason your way around it, but deep inside, you've already seen the truth. There are people in your life right now who are not what they pretend to be. They act like friends, they talk like family, but when your back is turned, or even when it's not, you feel something shift. You feel a pressure in the air. You feel your body tighten. That's your internal alarm system. That's the divine letting you know something isn't right. That's the whisper in your soul that says, "Stay awake." Energy doesn't ask permission, it just is. You can't fake light. You can't hide darkness. A person may speak with kindness, but if their heart is filled with jealousy, fear, bitterness, or control, you will feel it every time you interact. That's why sometimes you feel confused after talking to someone, like your emotions are tangled, like your peace has been tampered with. That confusion is the residue of spiritual interference. That confusion is the signature left behind by demonic energy. And the more spiritually clear you become, the more obvious it gets. It could be a parent who constantly criticizes your life under the mask of just trying to help. It could be a friend who subtly competes with your progress, pretending to cheer you on while secretly hoping you fail. It could be a partner who says they love you, but you always feel unseen, unheard, and spiritually starved. Listen closely, not to their mouth, but to the silence after they speak. Listen to the room, listen to your chest. Listen to your breath. Did your spirit expand or did it contract? That's the real language. That's the truth. You see, the demonic doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in tones of kindness. Sometimes it gives gifts. Sometimes it remembers your birthday. Sometimes it prays with you, sits next to you in meditation, sings songs of praise, and still holds the frequency of darkness. Why? Because darkness doesn't always hate the light. Sometimes it tries to live near it, imitate it, blend into it, so that it can slowly drain it without being seen. That's why you can be surrounded by people, even spiritual people, and still feel alone, still feel off balance. It's because the energy isn't aligned, even if the language is. There are people who will say they love you while feeding off your doubt. They will offer you advice that sounds helpful, but always keeps you dependent on them. They will frame their fear as concern. But every time you try to step out, evolve, rise, they'll plant seeds of hesitation. You feel it in their tone. You feel it in their eyes. It's the moment your light triggers their shadow, and instead of facing their shadow, they try to dim your light. That's not a coincidence. That's an attack on your spirit, and it's subtle enough that if you're not paying attention, you'll start to question yourself instead of questioning them. They might say, "I'm just looking out for you," but your body is heavy, your heart is uneasy, your peace is interrupted. So ask yourself, what matters more, their words or your inner reality? You don't need to decode everything they say. Just observe how your soul responds. Do you leave the interaction inspired, grounded, empowered, or do you leave confused, guilty, restless? That is the signal, that is the proof. Don't argue with it, don't explain it away, watch the energy. Trust it, follow it, because that's where the truth lives beneath the words, in the current flowing underneath every exchange. That's where the real battle takes place, not in the dialogue, but in the atmosphere, not in the voice, but in the vibration. Guilt is the oldest trap in the book. It's subtle, it's sticky, it's a weapon used by those who don't want to see you free. And it almost always comes dressed as love. But real love doesn't control. Real love doesn't chain you to past versions of yourself. Real love doesn't keep score. The demon, when it moves through people closest to you, doesn't scream in your face. It whispers guilt in your ear. It says things like, "After all I've done for you," or "This is how you repay me." It doesn't need to raise its voice because it knows exactly which buttons to push. It knows your history. It knows the emotional debt you've been trained to carry, and it uses it to control your present. They'll call it loyalty, they'll call it family duty, but if you look closely, you'll see it for what it is: bondage. Emotional manipulation disguised as tradition, and the deeper the bond, the heavier the guilt. You start thinking you owe them something just because they were around, just because they paid a bill or helped you during a rough time. But support without freedom is not love. Help that comes with a leash is not divine. If someone helps you only to hang it over your head for years, that was never service, it was a transaction. And the moment you try to grow, the moment you begin to rise, they come collecting that emotional debt. They say, "You wouldn't be here without me." But real love celebrates your evolution. It doesn't charge interest on it. These kinds of people want you to remember their sacrifices, but forget your suffering. They want to control your choices by constantly bringing up the past. They build invisible cages using your own memories. And because you're a good person, because you've got a heart, because you care, you hesitate. You pause, you shrink yourself, you start feeling selfish for wanting peace. You feel disloyal for choosing yourself. But that's exactly where the demon wins. When it convinces you that your growth is betrayal, they remind you that your blood, that family always comes first. But family doesn't come before truth. Family doesn't come before peace. Family doesn't come before God. If someone uses the word family to silence your spirit, they've already abandoned the meaning of the word. The people who truly love you don't use guilt to guide you. They don't use the past as a weapon. They walk with you. They grow with you. They let you change. They want to see you free. But these others, the ones who tighten their grip the moment you loosen yours, those are not your protectors. They are your captors in disguise, and what's worse, they do it with a smile. They'll play the victim while holding the knife. They'll say, "I just don't want to lose you," when what they really mean is, "I don't want to lose control over you." That's how the manipulation works. It twists your love into a chain. It makes you feel guilty for needing space, for wanting clarity, for choosing your own path. But guilt is not your guide. Peace is. And if someone claims to love you, but only supports you when you fit into their idea of who you should be, then they're not loving you. They're loving the version of you they can manage. People like this don't want conversation. They want compliance. They don't want understanding. They want obedience. And the second you stop being who they need you to be, the version that plays small, that seeks approval, that lives inside their control. They change. Their tone shifts. Their warmth disappears. That's when you see the truth. That's when the guilt turns into coldness. They'll say you've changed, not because you became unloving, but because you stopped being manageable, because you no longer dance to their emotional rhythm. And if you try to pull away, they don't fight for your healing. They fight for their position. They want access to your energy, not your well-being. They want control, not connection. So they twist every step you take toward freedom into a betrayal. They want you to feel bad for waking up, for seeing through the fog, for choosing light. And as long as you keep bowing to their guilt, you'll never break that chain. Because guilt is the currency of the demonic. It trades freedom for approval, truth for tradition, light for emotional debt, all while calling it love. The moment you start waking up, the game changes, not just in your mind, not just in your habits, but in your relationships. When you begin to rise, when your spirit starts to stretch beyond the old limits, when you start choosing silence over noise, peace over drama, truth over comfort, people around you shift. They don't always clap. They don't always support you. In fact, some of them become uncomfortable. Some become sarcastic. Some withdraw. That's when you start to realize not everyone in your circle was rooting for your evolution. Some were just comfortable with your limitations. You begin to see it clearly. You're not going to the same places. You're not engaging in the same arguments. You're not laughing at the same low vibration jokes. You don't feed gossip anymore. You don't entertain chaos. And suddenly they say you're acting different. They say you've become distant, cold, too deep. But the truth is, you're just becoming whole. And your wholeness offends the parts of them that are still broken. Your clarity agitates their confusion. Your silence exposes their noise. Your spiritual hunger exposes their comfort in stagnation. And it's not that you've changed in a bad way. It's that you've changed in a way that makes them question everything they're avoiding in themselves. They don't know how to handle that, so they project, they mock, they criticize what they don't understand. They start saying things like, "You're being brainwashed," or "You think you're better than us now," or "You're no fun anymore." But deep down, they're not angry at you, they're afraid. Because your awakening becomes a mirror, and mirrors are dangerous to those who have built their lives avoiding the truth. You used to laugh with them, now you sit in stillness. You used to get triggered by the same nonsense. Now you pause, breathe, and let it pass. And that power, that inner calm, that detachment, it threatens everything in them that still craves the noise. They miss the old version of you, but not because they loved you more back then. They just understood how to manage that version. The insecure you, the distracted you, the emotionally reactive you, that version fit nicely into their world. But the awakened you, the present you, the version that's watching your thoughts instead of acting on them, that version can't be manipulated. That version sees through facades. That version doesn't play the same games. And that makes them uneasy, because if they can't predict your reactions, they lose control. And people addicted to control hate when you start thinking for yourself. It's subtle at first. You'll notice their tone change when you talk about something meaningful. You'll feel their discomfort when you choose solitude over company. You'll hear the silence when you share a spiritual insight. They may not say it out loud, but their energy says everything. It says, don't grow too far away. Don't wake up too much. Don't become someone I can't manipulate anymore. Because your awakening shines a light on their inner shadows, and they're not ready to face them. They'd rather you stay asleep stay agreeable, stay predictable. You're not judging them. You're not trying to change them. You're just following your truth. But truth makes liars uncomfortable. Peace makes the chaotic restless. Discipline exposes indulgence. And freedom makes the enslaved furious. That's why you'll feel the most resistance from those who once claimed to love you the most, because your rising threatens the structure they've built around you. A structure where you were small, silent, and compliant. And now that you're not fitting into that role anymore, they feel betrayed. Not because you've wronged them, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself they were invested in. You begin to feel the weight of their disappointment, even when they smile. You sense the tension when you don't conform. You notice how they only support you when your decisions benefit them. And that's when it clicks they never loved your awakening. They love your attachment. As long as you were entangled in their expectations, they were happy. But the moment you started choosing your own path, your own thoughts, your own energy, the mask fell. And what stood behind it wasn't love, it was possession, because true love doesn't shrink when you grow. It expands with you. Anything that resents your awakening was never aligned with your soul to begin with. People often confuse discernment with judgment, especially when you begin to pull away from toxic patterns or toxic people. The moment you start trusting your inner knowing, when you stop explaining every move, stop defending every boundary, the accusations begin. You're being judgmental. You think you're better than everyone, but let's be clear, judgment comes from ego, while discernment flows from spirit. Judgment attacks, discernment protects. When your soul is waking up, you're no longer seeing the world through your old wounds, attachments, or insecurities. You're seeing it clearly, and with that clarity comes responsibility. The responsibility to protect your energy, to guard your peace, to move away from what drains your light, even when it wears the face of someone you love. Discernment is not loud. It doesn't scream or point fingers. It simply observes. It watches how someone behaves when they don't get their way. It listens to the words they choose when they're angry. It notices the patterns, the energy, the motives hiding behind the masks. And once it sees what needs to be seen, it acts not out of hatred, but out of alignment. You don't need to hate someone to leave the room. You don't need to expose someone publicly to remove their access to your soul. Sometimes the most sacred move you can make is silence. Distance, disconnection without drama, that's not judgment, that's spiritual hygiene. You have to be able to look at someone and say, your energy no longer aligns with my path, without needing to list 1,000 reasons why. You don't need a courtroom. You don't need a jury. Your spirit already knows. And yet, the moment you start moving this way, the guilt tactics come, the manipulation, the false concern, the rewinding of memories meant to pull you back into the old cycle. But discernment doesn't look backward. It doesn't get caught in nostalgia. It doesn't fall for the idea that just because someone has been in your life for a long time, they deserve a place in your future. You start to notice things that used to be invisible. The way a friend always centers themselves in your story. The way a family member only reaches out when they need something. The way someone always plays the victim while draining your joy. You begin to feel the weight of relationships you used to call normal, and that discomfort you feel, that's discernment waking up. That's your soul telling you that just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's safe. Just because someone's presence is consistent doesn't mean it's healthy. Familiarity is not the same as alignment. Loyalty is not the same as wisdom. Discernment doesn't mean you're above anyone. It doesn't mean you're spiritually superior. It just means you're finally tuned in to something deeper than surface-level connection. You're no longer drawn to loud personalities or flashy conversations. You're watching frequencies now. You're listening to vibration. You're tracking how you feel after every interaction. And that awareness changes everything. You're not afraid to walk away quietly anymore. You're not explaining your peace to people who thrive on your chaos. You're no longer trying to save anyone who's committed to misunderstanding you. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And yes, some people will get offended by your discernment, not because you've hurt them, but because your clarity exposes their shadows. Your refusal to be manipulated threatens the role they were playing in your life. Some will try to convince you that you're isolating yourself, that you've changed, but the truth is, you're not isolating, you're sanctifying, you're creating space for truth to live. And truth doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't beg for validation. It doesn't apologize for boundaries. The more awake you become, the more alone you might feel, but that loneliness is sacred. It's a sign that you've stopped feeding what was starving your soul. People who love your false self will always resent the version of you that chooses peace over performance, that chooses stillness over validation, that chooses alignment over attachment. That's why discernment is your protection. It keeps you grounded when emotions try to confuse you. It keeps you safe when old patterns try to pull you back. It reminds you that not everyone who smiles is pure, not everyone who shows up is loyal, and not everyone who claims to love you is sent by the divine. Some are sent as tests, others as distractions, few as mirrors, and even fewer as companions. The rest are lessons. And discernment is how you pass the test without having to relive the lesson. There comes a point in your spiritual journey where you can no longer pretend. You can no longer ignore what your soul knows. The masks fall, the energy speaks, the games become obvious, and the people you once called friend, family, or even soulmate begin to reveal their true alignment. Not through their words, but through how they react to your awakening. This isn't about ego. This isn't about being better than anyone. This is about finally seeing clearly. It's about recognizing when someone's presence is costing you your peace, when their love is laced with control, when their support is a leash, when their smile hides resentment, when their comfort thrives in your confusion. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to announce your exit. You just walk in truth. You just protect your spirit. You just watch. You listen. You honor your inner knowing. And yes, it will get lonely. Yes, you will be misunderstood. But peace has a price, and that price is everything that doesn't align with it. You're not here to carry other people's shadows. You're not here to shrink for their comfort. You're not here to confuse guilt with love. You're here to wake up, to rise, to walk in the light without apology. If demons can wear the face of a friend, of family, of a lover, then angels can wear solitude, stillness, and clarity. Learn to tell the difference, not with your mind, but with your spirit. That's where the truth lives. Not in how they act when you agree with them, but in how they treat you when you start choosing yourself. When you stop feeding their control, when you stop playing small, that's the real test. And if you pass it, you don't just protect your energy, you protect your destiny.